All right, this is video 6, and we're continuing with part 2 with Americans or in Europeans' history of genocide. How genocide is selectively labeled on situations. The only genocide or Holocaust that seems to be important in American history is obviously the Holocaust with the Jews, and that is a Holocaust that maybe that was after several. That was the only one that was going on with white people, which is why that's now important. And notice the more white Jews became, the more important the Holocaust became. Jews weren't necessarily considered white when they first got to America. That was Jews, Irish, Italians, Poles. They weren't considered quote unquote white. They weren't brought into the white fold until they needed to expand the white base, which we talked about in a previous video. So as they became white, the more important that quote unquote Holocaust became. But the Holocaust with Native Americans, Mexicans, or Negroes are not being recognized with the same name, kind of like when whites were given freedom or fought for freedom, they did a Declaration of Independence. But when blacks were given quote unquote freedom by the 13th Amendment, it was done in a proclamation. So it's not just a play on words, those words mean something. And it always state that what American whites get is not the same thing that's being shared for other groups. But not to get too far into that, we're still on genocide. And what is going to be really, really important that we understand is that the Holocaust and the genocide of a particular group of people, and in this case we're going to talk about the American Negro or black people, we have to understand that the Holocaust is still going on, in that it just has a different name, but the same laws, the same activity. In 1850, or better yet, in 1619, Jamestown, Virginia, Africans were brought here in chains to make money for white corporations. In 2018, disproportionately, blacks as a population and as a criminal group have been disproportionately used as a source of free labor for white corporations. It's the same thing that's going on in 1850 when blacks were allegedly emancipated from chattel slavery. Blacks control 0.5% of the country's wealth, and with all of the millionaires we have in the black community in 2018, we still control about 0.5% of the country's wealth. So the circumstances have not changed for black people economically from the days of chattel slavery to now. So it is not unrealistic to say that the Holocaust that was going on then, known as chattel slavery, is still going on, known as mass incarceration. Mass incarceration is a system of racial and social control stemming from the economic model of United States slavery. Mass incarceration is a system that targets specific members of the American underclass population, disproportionately minority groups. All right? How can we connect mass incarceration and slavery? Let's look at the 13th Amendment from 1865 that allegedly freed black people. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So where it says except, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except in this situation, except as a punishment for a crime. So if we have deemed it a punishment, and we have deemed you a criminal, you can be a slave. You will be a slave in the United States or any of its areas of jurisdiction. How do you make the jump between crime and black people? Let's look at the image of the black man in the United States. In the 1800s, even post 13th Amendment, you had Uncle Remus, which was a fictional character and narrator of a collection of African American folk tales, adapted and compiled by Joel Chandler Harris and published in 1881. And these were perpetuating a jolly, happy-go-lucky, content with his station in society image of the black man. Feeble-minded, needed to be controlled, needed to be told what to do. But with that writing of the 13th Amendment, except as punishment for a crime, to perpetuate slavery, criminal must be connected to the black person, the black man in particular. In 1614, there was a movie that came out, media. It was called Birth of a Nation. This movie was so popular, it was screened in the White House. This movie showed the black man as, for the first time, as a formidable opponent to the white man. So formidable that it took the Ku Klux Klan to defend the honor of whites. And this made a huge resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in the United States. And it showed the black man as a ravenous, rapist, criminal, and of course showed whites as these great benefactors of justice. In that movie, the Klan was depicted, and they showed the first images of the cross burning. What a lot of people don't know is the Klan had never burned a cross before that movie. That was a idea of the cinematographer who felt it was a great cinematic view. That movie was actually based off of a book called The Klansmen, and it was directed by D.W. Griffin. If you think about the connection, the inseparability of the Klan and the burning of that cross in the fabric of American society and lore, and how they have been forever connected when it didn't exist before, is it really unreasonable to think that the connection between criminality and the black man would could not be connected as well, especially with subsequent use of media to connect the two. All the way up to 1996 with Hillary Clinton making the statement of the super predators. That's something I actually remember. So, obviously, we're going to have to pick this back up with a part three. But we're talking about the United Nations ignoring, the world ignoring, the history of genocide and Holocaust with Europeans, specifically blacks, with blacks in America, and why blacks are not behind this, why African American community or the conscious community or whoever is not doing a focused movement for a charge against the United States for human rights violations. Because at one point shortly before his death, Malcolm X wanted to bring charges against the United States at the United Nations alleging human rights violations against black Americans. Suddenly, ironically, he was killed after years of preaching separation. When he began talking about holding the United States government accountable on a global scale, gone. So we'll be moving forward. I guess we're going to go to part three. But this part was to make that bridge between slavery, mass incarceration, 13th Amendment, slavery and slavery living today in the form of mass incarceration, and the use of media to connect the black image to suit the exception clause in the 13th Amendment.